Thank you, Russ, for that reading. I'm not sure where verse 16 and 17 came from, but today I want to talk about growing older and growing older gracefully. Some years ago, when I used to go to the salon, I guess we'd call it a salon, to do my hair, have my hair done. I don't know, I didn't go to the barber, it was a salon, so is that okay for me to say I went to the beauty salon? I went to the salon, and it was my first time there. And as I've begun to lose hair, I don't need to go anymore. Brenda cuts my hair now. I went and I sat down in the chair. I had a brand new lady who was doing my hair. Her name was Mary. And as we were having our getting to know one another conversation, she said, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" I said, "No, of course not." She said, "How old are you?" Yeah, I said, this is a couple of years ago. I said, "Well, I'll be 49 this November." And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking she's going to say, "Oh, you look 10 years younger than that." But instead, she said, "So how's that going for you? Do you notice any difference now that you're older?" I'm like, wow. But I said, I do. I do feel different. I notice a difference. It's harder to shed some of those extra pounds. My joints ache more. I've grown hard. At that time, I didn't have hearing aids, but I do now. I was growing hard of hearing. And Brenda and Grace would complain because I said, too much. And I realized I'm growing older. We're all growing older. And I think we have a choice in how we go about this. We can grow older gracefully, with a sense of dignity and character, or we can grow older reluctantly. There's a little bit of that in me. Bitterly, with many backward glances at our younger days until one morning we wake up and say, "I've grown old." And there's a difference between growing old and growing older. Ellsworth Callis, whom I've mentioned a time or two, wrote a book about this very thing a number of years ago, and in it he wrote, "Growing older is a process, growing old is a conclusion. Growing older means you're going somewhere, growing old means you've reached somewhere. Older is a journey, old is a destination." Now, I don't know about you, but my destination in life is not to grow old. My destination in life is to grow older with God, and as I do so, to grow to know God more greatly. My destination in life is to be in heaven with God. If I were to settle for old as my destination, then I would rob myself of some of the most precious years of my life, some of the most wonderful experiences of this journey. No doubt there's ups and downs in that journey. My body doesn't recover as quickly after a hard day's work anymore. I know some of you wonder, do you really work that hard? I thought you just worked Sunday morning a couple of hours. My reflexes aren't as bad. It's harder to remember things. And I've grown to be okay with the fact that I'll never be a Wimbledon champion, a PGA champion, a movie star, a millionaire, and quite likely, chances are good, that I will never be an international spy. Those are all things I wanted to be when I was younger. But as I've grown older, I've also come to realize I don't have to work harder, just smarter. I don't have to remember everything. And while I'll never be those other things that I named, I know that God has me right where I am supposed to be. I'm doing what God wants me to do, and I'm going to enjoy this journey. And I believe that when we can say that we are at the best place in our lives, we're growing older, not growing old. And there's an intentionality to how we grow older. The author of Psalm 92 gives us a clue as to what this might be. Verses 12 through 14a, Common English Bible Translation. It says, "The righteous will spring up like a palm tree. They will grow strong like a cedar of Lebanon. Those who have been replanted in the Lord's house will spring up in the courtyards of our God. They will bear fruit even when," the text actually says, even when old and gray, and I added the ER, older and grayer. And so if we leave that slide up there for a moment, I want to take a look at that first word, righteous. To be righteous doesn't mean I'm better than you are. It doesn't mean I'm holier than you are. It doesn't mean I'm at a higher level. It means I'm in a right relationship with God. And without a doubt, being in a right relationship with God takes intentionality. It doesn't just happen. There's deliberation to the choices that we make in this relationship. We choose to set time aside to read our Bible. And whether that's hardcover or on our smartphone or our tablet or our computer. We choose to be in prayer. Maybe private prayer or corporate prayer like we just had. We choose to raise our children in such a way that they know God. We choose to serve in God's name. We choose to make church on a Sunday morning a priority in our lives. We choose to give and love and live a life that honors God. And sometimes I think we try to make this too complicated. In my years of following Christ and being a pastor and just thinking about it, I've kind of come to one theological understanding. If I can ask the question, does what I do, does what I say, does what I don't do honor God? If what I'm doing, if who I am, if what I'm saying honors God, then I am deepening that relationship with God. You know, would I be ashamed if God knew what I was watching on TV? Would I be embarrassed if God knew what I was looking at on the computer? Is God okay with what I'm posting on Facebook? Can I hold my head proudly before God as I show Him my tax returns? Would God be pleased with how I'm treating my neighbors? Hopefully I can answer yes to all of that. When we live our life rightly, in a right relationship with God, we flourish. The NRSV translation of this, the righteous flourish like the palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. They are planted in the house of the Lord and flourish in the courts of our God. To flourish means to grow luxuriantly or to reach new heights of development. A righteous life doesn't occur by happenstance, nor does growing older gracefully. You know, one of the concerns that we have as we grow older, and I think we heard this from our prayer concerns, has to do with our health. And not only for ourselves, but for our loved ones. We worry maybe who's going to take care of me when I get older? Or we worry, am I going to be able to take care of my husband or my wife or my parents? The younger generation worries about how they're going to care for their aging parents. The cost of hospitalization and medicine and prescriptions and quality long-term care health facilities, that's high. And that's why it's so important to make health a priority in our lives now. Not later, not somewhere down the road, not when we get to it, but now. Now is the time to have a healthier diet. Now is the time for daily exercise. Now is the time to quit smoking. Now is the time to care for ourselves in such a way that we might save our own family from having to pay for our own neglect. John Donne once preached that no person lives unto himself or herself, and no one dies simply to himself. And I think that holds true for how we take care of ourselves. What we eat, how I manage my weight, if I exercise, whether I smoke or drink to excess, that's going to impact Brenda at some point. And it's going to impact Grace at some point. If not now, then somewhere down the road. I read a report once that said 1 out of 4 people between the ages of 65 and 74 exercise regularly. That's not all that many, 1 out of 4. Many people assume that they're too out of shape, too sick, too tired, or just plain too old to exercise. And I want to say they're wrong. It doesn't mean you know, at age 72, you go out and you hit the gym like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But you can walk. Walking's great exercise. Possibly swim. Exercise is almost always good for people of any age, says Chanda Dutta, PhD, Chief of the Clinical Gerontology Branch at the National Institute on Aging. Exercise can help make you stronger, prevent bone loss, improve balance and coordination, lift your mood, boost your memory, and ease the symptoms of many chronic conditions. But sometimes, no matter how we care for ourselves, the unexpected comes along. There aren't many of us here this morning who have not in some way felt the cold hand of fear on the back of our neck when the doctor utters that word to us, cancer. Alzheimer's claims our memories until father no longer knows daughter, wife no longer knows husband. Parkinson's, MS, ALS, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, there's nothing more frightening and frustrating than to see our health deteriorate, our bank accounts shrink, and our life expectancy grow short because of a disease that we didn't ask for. No amount of planning is going to help ease that burden for too very long. Through no fault of our own, this can leave us as invalids, physically, financially, and at times emotionally. This can eat away at us spiritually and relationally as well. On the other hand, I've known people, and elderly people who have little to no money. They have health concerns and very little mobility, yet they're the most cherished person in the family. They have the gift of bringing joy and light into our hearts with a simple smile, a kind word, a hug. They're willing to share words of wisdom about life, and we seek them out to hear what they have to say. We want to spend time with them. We want to sit at their feet as they share stories of their own childhood or when their children were young. When I was young, this goes back 30 years, I rented the upper flat of my uncle's house. It was a rental property, and so I had the upstairs to myself. It was the coolest little apartment I've ever had. A little while later, my grandmother moved in to the downstairs part of the house. And I loved having her as my neighbor. I would take her shopping on the weekends, take her grocery shopping. In the evening, I'd come home from work and we'd sit down together and have a cup of coffee. She would share stories of her growing up and what it was like. She would tell me what a rascal Grandpa was. I loved that time together. And she would tell me, she said, now don't tell the others, but you are my favorite grandchild. She did. It was some years later that I figured she probably tells every grandchild this. But at least for a while I felt really special. But too, she would lament the passing of her friends. You know, one of the fears of growing old is when you see the names of your own generation listed in the obituaries. And it can seem like a curse when you outlive your friends. I read something just the other day that helped put this into perspective for me. The writer said, so what if the circle of friends is by attrition growing smaller? Who then will grow old along with me? Can't we still make friends as we grow older? If we think of growing older rather than growing old, we can. If we can set our ways and our unwillingness to make room in our lives aside for new ideas, new people, then we are growing older and not old. If we are locked into this is how it has to be, then we've probably grown old and reached our destination. If we are enjoying the journey of growing older and we're willing to risk a little bit, we'll find new friends who are worth knowing, who bring a bit of their own story into our story. And these new friends might be a neighbor who moved in across the street. Maybe it's someone new at the church. Maybe it's someone much younger than ourselves. Hopefully it's someone who makes you laugh or lets you cry without embarrassment. Someone who's a good listener, someone who gives you hope and helps you to enjoy life. I believe that God cares about our friendships and knows our need to grow older with someone. So it's not out of the question to pray to God to bring us new friends. No matter how our life has turned out, it's never too late to turn from growing old to growing older gracefully, and remembering that the ultimate friendship in our life is that relationship with God. Genesis describes a place where God walks among us in the cool evening breeze. And while Eden has long been closed to us, it's as Robert Browning once said, our reach must exceed our grasp. Or what's a heaven for? As we pause to look with grace and faith upon our past with all its ups and downs, we look forward to God's heaven. And we give thanks for whatever life this has been. By God's grace and mercy, the best is yet to come. Amen.